No official diplomatic presence in Korat due to the civil unrest.
If you've been on planet Earth recently, then you may know a little bit about Ubisoft. They are the 10th biggest publisher in the world. Just like EA, I have seen Ubisoft in all of its variation: good, bad, hero and villain, scummy, and admirable. They make some truly crappy games, and some of the best, including one of my favorite games of all time, Splinter Cell: Chaos Theory. Time has not been so kind to Ubisoft though. They get a lot of flack and many people have turned a cold shoulder to them, especially lately. They've done the fake E3 trailer with Watch Dogs, and then they downgraded it, telling nobody. They claimed women are too expensive to feature as main characters, and that 30 frames per second is more cinematic than 60. They've forbid many reviews from coverage until post-launch. They are the kings of the bug, and they're certainly dipping into the microtransaction honeypot a lot more than they should be. A more pressing concern is that they have stuck to the yearly release schedules with so many of their games, some of which are borrowing perhaps too much stuff from one another. But, to their credit, they've been the master of the eye-catching game, the big open-world dream, and the innovator of so many fantastic game designs. From Far Cry to Assassin's Creed to Watch Dogs, they do deliver very high-quality games. They also make dreams come true, partnering with small developers and giving creation to games that would otherwise not be possible. In the last few years, Ubisoft has done an awful lot wrong and an awful lot right. They've been both the hand that feeds us and the devil that taketh away. But lately, they've also taken two giant steps in the right direction: their willingness to try new things and their acceptance towards breaking the shackles of their yearly release schedules. Today we're going to look at the successes of Ubisoft no one seems to be mentioning. Trying new things is something Ubisoft struggled to do for the longest time. It's been 5 years with the current generation of hardware. During the waning years of technology, publishers often become complacent in their game designs now that they have learned to crank out their games easier. To fall back on what works, basically, and prepare for the next generation of hardware. Often this means banking cash that will be used to fund the exploration of that technology once the day comes. Every publisher prepares for this change in hardware, and it will soon be upon the industry. The maturing stage of the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One is today, and with it comes the temptation to resign oneself to the complacency of simply refining successful ideas rather than having to spend money figuring out how to create them within the confines of a new system. Some of the immediate effects of the cyclical process are industry-wide at this point and mainly rest on companies releasing very similar style games with slight improvements. Ubisoft has definitely been guilty of this. You can point to Far Cry or Assassin's Creed and find many commonalities among them, maybe too many. But 2017 has probably been the year Ubisoft has tried the most new and interesting things, whether they ended up good or bad. And I commend them for trying, especially during a time when they could be falling back on the same, given that hardware cycle. One of my favorite surprises of last year was Mario plus Rabbids. Its XCOM-style turn-based tactical gameplay was probably the last thing I ever expected from either Mario or Ubisoft for that matter. It's incredibly fun and has a surprisingly high learning curve and challenge factor. It's the weirdest game I played last year, and usually, game makers, at least these days anyway, try to stay away from making weird games, especially a big-time publisher like Ubisoft. This trend was a side effect from a more continuing trend to create more original and interesting IP. I desperately wanted to love For Honor. While I believe it was doomed from various technical and game design issues, For Honor was actually really creative and a brand new IP for Ubisoft. It was basically a combo of a fighting game, chivalry, a MOBA, and an objective team-based game all in one with a unique historical warfare aesthetic. The gameplay, in theory anyway, was absolutely killer and I loved the combat wheel. But in the end, it just did not work, but it's great that Ubisoft at least dived into the deep end to explore such an interesting concept with For Honor. The same could be said with Steep as well. Again, it wasn't a terribly great game, but I mean, snowboarding? That is so 15 years ago. Steep had some great ideas and an open world concept that could have been so awesome, but once again, the actual game just didn't hit the mark. You can see the trend here, good ideas and just bad execution. Regardless, Ubisoft kept up the effort, even diving into some VR games like Star Trek Bridge Crew and indie games like Automega last year. And we can't forget about AC Origins either. Origins was actually a huge departure for Ubisoft. Technically, it was a world we had never seen before. It got so many little details right, and it was so different from prior games in terms of how it felt as a complete game. It created a new identity for Assassin's Creed. No longer a stealth game, Origins was a fleshed out action RPG with loot, leveling, and progression. It also had a brand new combat system. Whether that felt refreshing to you or unnecessary, the point remains. AC Origins was more of a departure for Ubisoft than any AC game that came before it. For all those examples, I think 2017 was the year Ubisoft really got privy to the idea of trying new things, and they weren't afraid to fail, and we should definitely commend them for that. Now the next step is to make sure those games are actually good. The dreaded annual video game is a reality that strikes fear and trepidation into the hearts of many a gamer. And for a while, that was Ubisoft's mantra. We have seen the Far Cry series pop out game after game after game, more or less every year since Far Cry 3. The question is, have they been unique enough? Well, that's up for debate, but I can tell you one thing, they would have been a lot more unique had they had a longer development. Ever since 2017, we have received around 9 or 10 mainline Assassin's Creed games and countless spin-offs and ports. Pretty much every single year, something Assassin's Creed has come out. To my happiness, Ubisoft realized that they need to slow this down a little bit. And the first evidence of this is obviously the 2-year window between Assassin's Creed Syndicate and Origins. I know, hooray! Finally a flagship game that didn't get released in back-to-back years. It sounds trivial, but it means a lot to the industry. Increasingly, we have seen the quality, polish, and innovation of games suffer because they get forced into a nasty yearly release schedule. I haven't enjoyed a new Call of Duty game in a long time, not because they're bad, but because they're no longer new and interesting. It takes time to fundamentally change something and build a refreshing sequel. You can't have the quality unless you work for it. But the good news is, the waiting period isn't the enemy, it can actually be the ally. Distance often makes the heart grow fonder, and if we equate that to time, it starts to make me reflect on why I love certain games more than others. There's a certain amount of excitement that gets built up around a game that doesn't come around all the time or doesn't overstay its welcome. It's the same sensation I get when I see a developer say, "We'll release it when it's ready." It makes me loyal to a game when I see that publishers and developers are forcing me to wait to ensure that I will be blown away when that day comes. So time allows us to miss games and get excited for the next one, but time is even more important to game makers. Time gives not just more time to create an amazing game, but for it to go through the proper filtration channels prior to release. I'm of course talking about testing and quality assurance. More often than not, Ubisoft has definitely been guilty of putting out games that are just not ready, or are unstable, or buggy, or unoptimized. It's a shame because a great game doesn't deserve that. I think AC Unity is a shining example of this. It's really important to have both ample time for the creation and the refinement process for a new video game. Assassin's Creed Origins got another year, and I think it greatly benefited from it. Even though I don't like the direction of its RPG implementations, I think Origins is a pretty awesome game that is both unique and technically amazing. The world Ubisoft built is stunning and beautiful and huge and historically accurate without compromising its game design. I don't think this would have been possible had Ubisoft Montreal had just 1 year to create this game. And their reward for this extended time period of development? Well, AC Origins sold double the units of AC Syndicate. Besides Assassin's Creed, Ubisoft also took a 3-year break from South Park and another 2-year break from Watch Dogs and Far Cry, so I think they're finally starting to come around, and that makes me happy as a gamer. For all the crap I give Ubisoft on this channel, I think it's also important to give them credit when credit is due. Even though I didn't actually like many of the changes to Origins, and I thought Steep and For Honor and Automega were actually kind of bad games, I admired them for trying new things and for giving their franchises some chance to breathe. I just think they now need to work on making sure their new ideas are actually fun and pieced together right. So, Ubisoft, hero or villain, drop it in the comment box below. Thanks for watching, guys, and a big thanks to my Patreon donors who have made this video possible. Have a great day, and we'll see you in our next video.